Welcome to yet another episode of Minecraft Mods Unlocked. In this video, we'll dive into everything you need to know about the advanced machinery in Mekanism. This guide covers the thermal evaporation plant to create brine and every advanced machinery involved with it. And be sure to stick around to the end of the video to learn how to literally quintuple your ores. And in the next installment of this series, we'll explore everything you need to know about reactors, so stick around the channel for that too. Alright, enough intro. I'm Avo, let's get into it. Alright, so let's go ahead and jump into creating the thermal evaporation plant here, and everything you're going to need for this is some thermal evaporation blocks, some thermal evaporation valves, which is right there, and at least one thermal evaporation controller. So next I'm going to go ahead and show you how to set this up. So just starting from whatever block you want to, come 1 2 3 4, and then come back 1 2 3, and then fill the rest of this in. Now come up 2 times and then do this all around the plant. Alright, now that we're done filling the edges in, it'll look something like this. It's just a cube with nothing on the outsides. So let's go ahead and break ourselves some of these thermal evaporation blocks here. I'm going to add a valve here. I'm going to add a valve here. And I'm going to add a valve right here. Now I'm going to take one thermal evaporation controller and just add it anywhere like right here. Now as you can see, it did some red particles and this thermal evaporation controller is on. So you don't actually need to power this plant or do anything with any of the power. It'll power itself somehow with, I don't know, magic or maybe my hopes and dreams. But from here, go ahead and grab yourself a sink and some ultimate mechanical pipes or any mechanical pipe that you have. And we're going to go ahead and set up the water for it. So just put the sink here, shift right click on the thermal evaporation valve right underneath the sink, or right on top of the sink grab a configurator, make sure the sink is pooling. And if we take a look right here, we know that it is 62 degrees Fahrenheit inside of the plant right now, and it has a ton of water inside of there. Now we need this plant to heat up to actually create brine. And the one way that you can do that is actually just setting it in the desert, setting this all up in the desert, and that'll create brine very slowly. Or another way that I like to do it, since we are sticking to the Mekanism mod here, other than the sink of course, is grab yourself a resistive heater, grab yourself some thermodynamic conductors, and grab yourself some universal cables. From here, let's go ahead and throw a resistive heater on the front here, and let's use our thermodynamic conductor to go ahead and supply the evaporation plant with some heat. Next, let's go ahead and power this. So I'll go ahead and bring some power over to here, and it only accepts power from the side here. Now, if we look inside of here, you can see that the temperature is going up, and it's very slowly creating brine. Now, using this resistive heater, it's going to use a lot of energy, so make sure you guys have a great way to actually produce energy. For me, I'm using a creative energy block, but that is just for the purposes of this video. Now, if you want to create brine quicker, then what you can do is actually come to this resistive heater, and then type in a pretty high number, let's say 1000, press enter, and then as you can see, it'll bring up the temperature inside of the resistive heater, and it'll also bring up the temperature inside of here. Now this temperature is going to probably go up to about 5000 degrees Fahrenheit, and as you can see, it created tons and tons of brine. I'm just going to come back in here and actually just do like 3 bajillion, and we're going to bring the heat all the way up, as you can see right here, because I have infinite power. Now that we actually have a ton of brine, what do we do with it? Well, first off, let's go ahead and grab ourselves an electrolytic separator. Let's place that right underneath our other thermal evaporation valve. Grab yourself some more mechanical pipes. Place those right here, shift right click, and use your configurator to make sure this is pulling into the electrolytic separator. And if you take a look right here, this is completely full, and that is going to be filling up as well, your pipe is. And when we power this, it's going to turn into 2 separate chemicals, so let's go ahead and power it now. Alright, so now that it's powered, we take a look inside of here, and it's creating sodium, which will be used later, and chlorine, which I'll talk about right now. So now that we know how to set up the thermal evaporation plant, let's actually put it to use. So this is a similar setup to what we have with the resistive heater here, with the sink here. We have the electrolytic separator here, and the brine coming out the front, and then on this side we have a thermal evaporation controller. I built it into the floor, but I made it so that we can see, I made it tall enough so that we can see on the inside to ensure that it's working. Now from this electrolytic separator, use a pressurized tube to bring over your chlorine. So if we look inside the side config here, go over to gases, make sure on the right side it's on output 2, which is cyan, and as you can see right here, the chlorine is also cyan. So now we know that chlorine is going into this pipe, and then we're going to need a chemical infuser right here, with chlorine being pushed into the left side of the chemical infuser. As we can see right here, we have chlorine right there, and if we look inside of the gas, we have input on the left side, which is red, and then we also have input 2 on the right side, which is orange. Now over here, we're using a sink to supply water to another electrolytic separator, and we're actually using the hydrogen from the left side of this electrolytic separator to go into the right side of the chemical infuser. So as you can see, we have a hydrogen coming in here, and if we take a look in the middle, hydrogen plus chloride makes hydrogen chloride, and then this hydrogen chloride is actually being pumped out of the front over to another chemical injection chamber, which I'll talk about in a second. Now from this electrolytic separator right here, what you want to do is make another pressurized tube pumping oxygen over into a purification chamber that is set to the right side of the chemical injection chamber. So what the chemical injection chamber does is it actually uses hydrogen chloride to purify your ores. So if we take a look right here, we can throw some raw iron in. It's using hydrogen chloride as the fuel, and then it makes iron shards. So 3 raw iron makes 8 iron shards. The 8 iron shards go into the purification chamber. The purification chamber then uses the oxygen that we wired over from the electrolytic separator to kind of purify the iron shards, and that turns them into iron clumps. Now we have a crusher set up directly to the right of the purification chamber, and it'll turn the iron clumps over to dirty iron dust. Set up an enrichment chamber directly on the right side of the crusher, and that'll turn dirty iron dust into iron dust, just regular. And then if you have an energized smelter set up directly to the right side of the enrichment chamber, then it'll smelt your items for you, and then you can add a chest at the end that'll hold your end product, which is in this case iron. So this whole process almost triples the amount of ore that you have. According to ChatGPT, it's 2.67 times more ore. Yes, I asked ChatGPT instead of doing it myself, and this is how it will look. You need a thermal evaporation plant with an electrolytic separator in the front, a chemical infuser to the right of that, an electrolytic separator to the right of that, a chemical injection chamber, purification chamber, crusher, enrichment chamber, and energized smelter. Now for all of these machines, I have the side config. On the right side, it says item config right here, and on the right side, it's always output, and auto eject is always on, so that it always moves the item that when it's done processing from here over to here, and auto eject is on everything here. Now let's move over to a more complicated setup, and I have signs here just in case anybody gets confused. You can reference the signs as I'm talking, and I also have color-coded my tubes so that way we know what is in each tube without me necessarily mentioning it each time. So in this purple tube here, if we look in the side config and go to gases, we know that the output is blue, so it's going to be hydrogen chloride. In this blue tube right here, we can see that it has oxygen in it, so this whole blue tube, wherever it goes, we know it's going to be oxygen. And in this red tube here, we know that it's actually going to be sulfur trioxide in the red tube. So let's go ahead and take a look at this setup, and then I'll explain it step by step. So first of all, the setup is extremely similar to what we had right over there. We have the thermal evaporation plant with the brine coming out into an electrolytic separator, and then the chlorine is coming to the right of that over into a chemical infuser. The chemical infuser is using chlorine and hydrogen from another electrolytic separator to create hydrogen chloride. Then the hydrogen chloride comes up and over down to a chemical injection chamber, and this chemical injection chamber is actually processing gunpowder. So as you can see right here, I have tons of gunpowder in here. I'm using a logistical transporter to move the gunpowder to the back of the chemical injection chamber, and then it is being imported there, and it's using hydrogen chloride, which we brought over from the chemical infuser, as the fuel. Now when this gunpowder is processed, it's processed into sulfur dust, as you can see right here. So directly to the right of that, we have a logistical transporter which moves the sulfur dust over into a chemical oxidizer, and that chemical oxidizer turns sulfur dust into sulfur dioxide. So as you can see right here, if I were to break that, it would create sulfur dioxide. So let's go ahead and place this pressurized tube back, and now that we moved our sulfur dioxide through the pressurized tube, it's going to go into another chemical infuser. And in this one, we have oxygen, which we brought over from this electrolytic separator. We brought it up and over. So oxygen is going to be on the left side, and then we are going to have the sulfur dioxide coming from the left side into the chemical infuser, and when it comes into here, it will actually make sulfur trioxide, as you can see here. So if I were to break this tube right here and this tube right here, and then wait for it to get done, as you can see, it creates sulfur trioxide. Next up, let's talk about making water vapor. And to do this, you just need a sink or some other infinite water source, an ultimate mechanical pipe coming down into a rotary condensator. We talked about this in the last episode of this series as well, so if you're confused about any of this, go watch that episode a little bit. It's only 5 minutes long. And all this does is you pump water into here, and then it turns that water into water vapor. Now make sure you toggle this operation, because you don't want it to look like this. You don't want it to try to turn water vapor into water. You don't want it to look like that. Toggle this operation, and then it's going to turn water into water vapor. Now from here, we're going to use a pressurized tube to come over to another chemical infuser, and on this side we're going to have water vapor, and on the right side here we're going to have our sulfur trioxide that we have exporting out the front here coming to the right side. And then what that creates is sulfuric acid. Now our sulfuric acid is actually exported out over to this pipe right here. As you can see at the top, it's holding 167,000 millibuckets, and it'll actually come over to a chemical dissolution chamber. Now what this does is it turns iron or any other ore into kind of like a slurry. So if you look inside of here, we have dirty iron slurry, and we're using our sulfuric acid to turn the raw iron into the slurry. That's then transported using a pressurized tube over to a chemical washer. This chemical washer turns the dirty iron slurry over into clean iron slurry, and then we are obviously using water from a sink to wash this. So all you need to do is import water from the top, import the slurry from the side, and export the slurry from the other side. So as you can see, this has 302 millibuckets of clean iron slurry in the tube. And if we come over to this chemical crystallizer, we can see that it's full of iron slurry, and the chemical crystallizer turns the iron slurry into iron crystals. The iron crystals are then moved with a logistical transporter over to a chemical injection chamber, and then we bring our hydrogen chloride pipe over and place it on top of the chemical injection chamber. So as you can see, this follows all the way back over here to this first machine, and we have this to output hydrogen chloride on the top here. So blue is output and blue is hydrogen chloride right there. After the chemical injection chamber, we're going to need to supply the purification chamber with oxygen. So as you can see, this blue cord right here connects all the way back over to this chemical infuser here, which connects all the way back over to this electrolytic separator. So this electrolytic separator is supplying oxygen all the way back over here. Now after the chemical injection chamber turns your iron crystals into iron shards, your purification chamber will turn that into iron clumps, and then your crusher will turn that from iron clumps into dirty iron dust. Your enrichment chamber will turn it from dirty iron dust to regular iron dust, and your energized smelter will smelt it just like a regular furnace would. And that is how you quintuple your amount of ore. This is 5xing your amount of ore by the time you get done. Yeah, it takes a lot of setup, it takes a lot of time and a lot of learning, but by the end of it, you will have a lot more resources when you get done. And if you guys are wondering what this is, it's a cardboard box. I don't know why it's here or what it does, but it's in the mod for some reason. That's gonna do it from me, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, a subscribe, a comment down below on any other videos you guys would like me to make, or you guys could just leave a comment for anything else. All right, guys, I'm Avo. Peace.